You can actually build a scale by actually putting all this together. Rock and blues music is built around tension and resolve. One of the ways that is achieved is through playing major chords here. And then over the top of that, you've got that minor scale. And then we've got our major pentatonic scale. So that's one of the mysteries of music with rock music, is basically the interaction between a major chord and a minor scale, minor pentatonic scale. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Now imagine if you can actually build a scale by actually putting all this together and consolidating it into one idea. Well, you can easily do that by just putting all those notes into one actual meta scale or one super scale. Theoretically speaking now, you can mix all those three things together and create a limitless creative tool by superimposing your chord and then your minor pentatonic scale and then your major pentatonic scale. So now you're thinking three-dimensionally because you're using the tonality of the basic chord, and then you're using the tonality of the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic. And this is how a lot of guitar players play. So what they'll basically do is they'll move back and forth between the major and minor pentatonic scale. When you're playing blues and rock music, the next basic tonality, apart from the minor pentatonic scale, is the major pentatonic scale. Now this is really easy to access and really easy to play because you already know it. All you got to do is take the scale that we've already learned and move it down 3 frets. And that is your major pentatonic scale right here. Same exact fingering, but you just jump down 3 frets, and that takes it to the relative major. So say if we're playing in the key of C, just jump down 3 frets, and then... And that gives you access to all those kind of like southern rock sounding licks. So now you can superimpose these notes here over the top of this chord. But the way we're going to do that to actually move them up over this chord is use the second pattern of the pentatonic scale, which is right here, as you can see. So here's your C major chord, and then here's the notes of the major pentatonic scale, but played using the second pattern, and it fits perfectly over this chord. Okay, so far we've got our C7 chord, we've got our minor pentatonic scale, and then we've got our major pentatonic scale. So for example, if we take a song like Crossroads, when Clapton's playing that song, he'll be constantly moving back and forth between the major and minor pentatonic scale as well. So, you know, in the solo in that song, he starts in the major pentatonic scale. And then he jumps up. But then he moves back into the minor. All that's minor. So he's moving back and forth between the major and minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so let me show you something really interesting here. Let's go back to the key of C. If you can actually build a scale by actually putting all this together. So what you're going to have, basically, if you look at the intervals there, you've got a root, a second, a minor third, major third, fourth, fifth, major sixth, flat 7, and then it just repeats. So that's the scale, that's the combining all. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes. So that makes it kind of like almost like a bebop scale. So here's how the whole scale looks when you map it out across the fretboard. Let's take it from the top going down. So the first 2 strings, the E and the B string, are real easy to remember because it's just like that. Kind of like a rockabilly, you know, all the rockabilly songs always use that. It's a real easy thing to play, those 6 notes. Now, when you get to the 3rd string, it's really interesting because it's actually chromatic. So you've got this, then you've got this chromatic run here. And what that's doing, that's going from the 4th to the major 3rd to the minor 3rd to the 2nd. Okay, so then that's the whole scale, basically. Then you're going to start on the octave. Basically, the run goes like this. So it's kind of the opposite of this shape, finger 4, 3, 1. on the 4th string, it's going to be finger 4, 2, 1. You play that twice, and then you go back to the 4, 3, 1 shape right here. And remember, the low E string and the high E string are the same. So whatever you play on the high E string, you can play those same notes on the low E string, and they're 2 octaves lower. So the whole run goes like this. And all those notes you can use when you're soloing. And when you start to think of that, you're bringing together these 3 ideas, but it gives you access to all these different notes. So there's a new scale now. It's this hybrid scale, but also as you're playing it, it opens up all these possibilities because you're not just thinking of it one-dimensionally as a scale that runs up and down. So as you're playing, you're putting together the notes of the pentatonic scale and the notes of the chord. And when you do that, you've got these 3 things kind of gravitating around each other. And then at that point, the creative possibilities become limitless. You can make some really cool runs by going through that scale. So it's got a really interesting sound just like that. But you don't really necessarily want to use it like that. The way you want to probably think about it more is using your basic pentatonic licks, and then using the major minor superscale on top of that for color. So your basic licks would be right there under your fingertips. And then every now and then you can reach for notes from the superscale. And it could just be one of them, but you know which ones you can reach for. Let's go through the additional notes. So you've got the basic 5 notes of the pentatonic scale, and then you've got these extra 3 notes that you're adding in. So you're adding in a second, a major third, and then a major 6th. So let's look at the weight of each one of those notes. So for example, adding in a second always is going to sweeten the sound of the major pentatonic scale. So Stevie Ray Vaughan or B.B. King would do that all the time, where they basically add in that second, right? Or if you go down the scale and land on that second, like Dave Gilmour style, it makes it more melodic sounding. So just adding that second in there is a really cool color. Okay, so let's look at the minor third. So the minor and major third, that interaction between those 2 notes is crucial to blues. And it's an amazing way you can spice up your playing. So whenever you hit that minor third, there's a lot of tension on there, right? But when you go to that major third, it pulls it towards the sound of the major chord. So you can do a lot of interplay between that. And a way that a lot of players do that is just by hammering from the minor to the major, like this. And then the 6th, right here, when you add that note in, it's a major note, so it adds that brightness of the major scale in, but it also adds an element of mystery, because this is kind of half step between the flat 7 and the major 6th. So Carlos Santana uses that. So a great way of approaching that is using this major minor superscale as kind of like a way of accessing these tonal colors and throwing them on top of your standard rock licks. What you can do is start to kind of put together these licks based around your basic minor pentatonic scale, but target some of the notes from the superscale on there. So you're basically going to be targeting your second, or your major third, or your 6th. And just see how interesting that is if you just you take that approach, where you're just adding in one extra note there. All of a sudden your licks start to get a lot more interesting. Or if I target the major third, or the major and minor third, or the 6th. See the mystery of that sound?